Hello and welcome to Paper Plays Julie K. Thanks so much for stopping by, and today I've been working on creating some boho beads and embellishments, and I decided maybe I would pop on and record how I create one in case anyone is wondering what my process is. And I do have to say these are a ton of fun to do and they are quite addicting. And so here's the ones that I've kind of already created. I still have to put charms on all of these, but I just wanted to kind of show you guys what I've been working on. Just kind of some different colors. It's a great way to use up some different scraps and even beads that you might have in your collection that are left over from other projects, or even beads you're not quite sure what you're going to do with. They work really great on these little embellishments. So all the ones I've been showing you guys, I have added a top to them and a bottom, so if I wanted to hang them off of something like this one, I did add a little garment pin up at the top. And then in the other side I plan on putting a charm on most of these. But I did create a couple just like this that actually are open in the middle, so if I wanted to actually use them as beads I would be able to do that. I'd be able to string them onto something. So I did create a few like that also, but most of them do have the tops and the bottoms on them just so I can use them, you know, hanging off on a tassel or some sort of embellishment. And so those are the ones I've created so far. And so I just figured I would show you guys my process. To create this project, I like to use tubing, which looks like this. I do know that the original lady that I learned these from, which offhand I can't remember her name, but I will link her channel below in the description box. She used like a piece of plastic from a pen where she just cut it and used a little piece of the tubing from the pen, the outside of the pen. But I do have some of this type of tubing, and I bought it specifically to make these types of embellishments. And you can pick up tubing similar to this at the hardware store. But I was lucky enough at our local thrift store, they do sell some medical equipment. And this is tubing that's used like for oxygen, for people who use oxygen. Here was actually the little bag that it came out of. And they had it listed for $1 and I only paid 50 cents. For it. So that was, I didn't think I could buy it at the hardware store for 50 cents. So I thought that was a good deal. And so I had picked up a couple of them. And the other one I already cut up, as you guys can see. But I'll just show you what I did. So you need the tubing. And I just cut off these ends right here and just throw them in the garbage. But now I have all this tubing to work with to create more embellishments. And so what I like to do is to cut them to size. You can cut them any size you like. Most of the ones that I created are about 3 inches. And this one's a little bit smaller. This one is about 1.5 inches to 2 inches. So I will cut this to 3 inches. But again, you guys can cut it whatever size you want. That's what's kind of fun about these, is that you can cut them whatever size you want. So that's approximately 3 inches. And you will also need some sort of material or textile things. I have some scraps. And I have some of this type of, I'm not even quite sure what it's called. But it's some sort of yarn. And it looks like this when you open it up. But I have a lot of that I've picked up in the past at the thrift store. I do have some eyelash trim and some other little fiber that looks like this that I plan on using. And like I said, some scrap material. And I have a string of beads. I also have some bead caps that I'll be using. I do have some beads in a couple different places that I'll probably be using. And I have some jump rings, because I think I'm going to put a charm on this one that I'm creating with you guys. And you also need some wire. I'm not quite sure what the gauge is of this one. It's just some wire I've had in my stash for a long time, but it's easily bendable. but it doesn't break when you bend it. So I'm not quite sure what the gauge is. But you do need some wire. And then since I am going to be stringing the wire through the tubing, and I want to put a little hook at the top, you do need some sort of pliers for that. And then also I like to use, and I'm not even quite sure what this tool is called here, but it's used for the jump rings to open them up to make it easier. So I do have this tool also. And then I will also be using Fabri-Tac glue for this. So to begin with, again, cut your tubing to size. And the first thing that I like to do then is to pick out whatever material I want to start with. And for these beads, you do a lot of layering. And so I will start with some Fabri-Tac glue. And I just run it along the whole top of the bead, but you can just do a little bit if you want. So I have some glue on there. And so I'll just start off with some of my material. Again, this is great for using up scraps of material or those bits and pieces that you cut off for other projects like this one. I used for something else and it was just a little remnant left over. And so I just very carefully just wrap it around the tubing. And I'm not too worried about all the little remnants that stick out, just the type of material this is. I kind of like the look of it for this type of project. And I usually like to cover my tubing all the way at least once with the material. But if you run out because you only have a small scrap, you can just start over again with another piece. And so I'm just going to cut this off. And I will put a little bit of glue on the very end here. And I'll just stick that down. So that's kind of my first layer. You can also definitely do these with paper if you don't have a lot of fibers or anything, but I love the look of the fiber. And let's see, next, next I'm going to use some of this, and this just came off of a scarf, and I'm using it on another project, and these are just, again, just some remnants left over from that. And so again, I'm just going to just start off with a little bit of glue. And I'm just going to glue this down in a couple spots, wrap it, and then glue it. Your hands do get a little bit messy when you do this. So I usually try to have like a little wet wipe sitting next to me so I can keep on rubbing the glue off on my fingers as I go. So I have that layer down, and if you wanted to, you could keep on going. But I think I'm going to wrap a little bit of this on there now. And again, I'll just start it. Just add a little bit of glue. There's a little fuzzy there that I'm just going to trim off. I don't like that. Just going to add a little bit of glue to the end of this and wrap it down and glue it. So that's what we have so far. And next I'm going to glue down some of this bead trim, and this, like I said, your hands will get kind of full of glue when you do this step. But I do like the look of the little string glue on here, so I'm just using that Fabri-Tac glue. And I'm just going to kind of hold it in place until it catches there. And just wrap it in a few different spots. And I do add a little bit of glue wherever I plan on wrapping it, just so that it stays down. As I'm wrapping, I'm still kind of holding right here on this end, just the very end, to keep it down. And so I am going to hold this in place until it kind of dries. And that'll take a couple of minutes. So I'm going to turn off the camera and I will be right back after this dries. But I will hold it like this until it dries. You can also like put a little clip on it if you want to, but I just hold it, like I said, and you can already see that this side's almost already glued down. So I will let that dry and I will be right back. Okay, I'm back and it's still a little tacky to touch, but for the most part, the beads are now sticking down. So next I'm going to add a few more fibers to my little embellishment here. I usually just add a little bit of glue to start them and then also to finish them. Or you can also tie them down, which I've done that too. And so I just wrap it around in a couple different directions. And since the glue is still tacky up at top, that should stay because it's still wet enough. So that's kind of what I have now. And then I'm going to glue down a little bit of this thread, and this time I'm just going to tie it down just to show you guys that you can also just tie them on too and then wrap them. So if you don't like to use the glue, it does work to just tie them off. And I'm just making a little knot up there. Then I usually let this one hang, and then I'll tie it again when I'm done wrapping. And again, I'm just kind of going around a few times. And then when I get it back up to the top again, I will just tie it off. So this is just another, like I said, another alternative to using the glue for your fibers. You can just tie them off too. So that's what we have so far. If you like what it looks like, you can of course stop and move on to the next step, but I think I am going to add a few beads wrapped around with the wire on here. And so I'm just kind of looking at some of the different beads that I have. And I pulled some out earlier in shades of blue that might match this embellishment. This would look nice too with some, pink, since that's kind of the color I went with, or fuchsia. And so to wrap the beads with the wire, I just cut off a piece of wire, and you can use a wire cutter, and I'm just going to use my scissors, but don't do this with a good pair of scissors. This is just kind of an old pair of scissors I have. You don't want to ruin your good scissors. And so I just end up laying a little bit of the wire down, and then I start to wrap, and I'm wrapping over this little piece right here, so hopefully that makes sense. And then after I get it wrapped around a couple of times, then I start adding some beads. And you can do all different beads, or you can do all the same. It doesn't really matter. That's kind of what's fun about these is. And I'm running out of room. I didn't cut enough wire this time, so I'm just going to finish it off, I guess. And so I just stick this wire back under some of the previous wires and kind of through some of the fibers. Is how I tie it off usually. So I'm going to wrap it underneath that wire, and then I'm going to go back on it and just kind of bend it so that, and wrap it under again. I just so that the beading doesn't come off of the wires, I just wrap it around and underneath itself a few times. So that's what we have now. And if you like that and you want to use it as a bead, you can stop, because now you could string some string through your tubing and you can use it as an actual bead or jewelry piece. Or if you want to make it into an embellishment and hang it like from a tassel or something like this one that I've already created, that's what we're going to do next. So what I like to do is grab a bead cap and some beads. So I'm just going to grab 2 bead caps here, and that's what a bead cap looks like. And I still have some of these beads left over, so I think I'm just going to use these. So I take some more of the wire, and I'm just going to put it up through the tube. And then at the top end, I'm going to put the little bead cap down just to kind of finish off the top here. And then I'm also going to put a bead on top of that. So that's what I have there. And I'm going to take my little pliers and I suppose this is what, approximately maybe 3/4 of an inch right here to an inch. And I just, well, I'll go down to an inch here. Yeah. So I take about an inch on my needle nose plier here, and I just bend the wire away from me, and then I change my grip on my pliers and put it up, and then I wrap the wire over the top and down a little bit, so then I kind of end up with a little hook like this. And then again I hold it up here, and since this is pretty pliable wires, I can just take my finger or my thumb here and I just wrap around and around until I've used all that little small end of wire. And that's how I make my tops. I'm not one of the best jewelry maker people out there, so I don't always do it correctly, but that's how I do it. And I don't mind that it's a little bit messy. If there's a little bit more wire hanging off, you can use a wire cutter, or again, I just use my old scissors, but again, don't do this with your good scissors. And I just kind of cut it. And sometimes I have to just flatten out that wire so that it's flat. So now I've made a little hook up at the top like that. And so now I push my bead and everything up to the top. And then at the bottom end, I give myself a little bit of extra wire. And I just cut it. Again, I'm going to end it the same way. I'm going to put a bead cap on the end and then a bead. You can certainly put more beads on it if you want. I have a couple where I've done a couple at the top like that one, but this one I'm just going to do the one bead. And I did cut my wire a little bit more than what I needed to, but so again, I just go a little ways above where that bead ended, maybe 1/4 of an inch or so. And I almost do the exact same thing I did before. I bend my wire away from me. and I rotate my hand up like this, and I take this wire and I wrap it back over the top. And again, I've kind of started a little hook there. And then I just take the wire here and I just start wrapping it around this wire. And again, I'm using really pliable wire, so it's easy to just bend it with my fingers. And I just wrap it until I don't have any wire left. And again, you'll have like a little piece hanging right there. And so you can either cut it or just keep on trying to wrap it around. And if I can't, I just take my scissors and trim it off. And so now I have a little embellishment. And so the next step is to add a charm, since I added this. So I do have some charms that I've made from other projects that I kind of have left over here. So I'm just going to look and see what I have. So I do have a feather. Here's some wings. Here's a little rose. I do have some little cute beads. And I think I'm going to hang a feather and one of these beads off of the bottom. These ones already have jump rings on the top. Or this one has a hook on it because it was bought that way. And then this one I've already added the little jump ring to the top. But this one doesn't have a jump ring on it. You can just see it has a little hook on it. And so I am going to add a jump ring to it. And I use the ones that have a couple, that they're wrapped around a couple of times. I don't know if you're going to be able to see that. But what I like to do is to open it, I have this little tool and this is what it looks like. And I bought this at Hobby Lobby in the beading section. But if you look at this little hook on the end right here, and again, I don't know the correct term for this tool, but it does hook right into the jump ring. And again, this is going to be really hard to show on the camera, but I'm going to try. I don't know if you can see that there's a couple different layers to that jump ring. And I like these jump rings better than the ones that are just single because they will hold your stuff in place. But if you put that little hook in between the two, it opens it up for you. And it makes it so easy to then hook on the top of your little bead. So it's kind of hooked on there, and then I just grab another little pliers and I just move the jump ring around so that it's on the charm here, the bead. So now it's on. And then again, I use that same little tool then to open up that jump ring again. And again, I'm just sticking the little hook there, and so then I can easily then add it to the bottom of my little boho embellishment here. Once it's on, like again, I do find it easier to move it with the little pliers so that it goes on all the way. So now my little one bead is on. And so I'm going to add this little feather too, I think. And this one I already have the jump ring on, so again I'm just going to open it up so then I can add it to the bottom here. I do apologize if my camera's not focusing. It just, when you're doing this really detailed stuff, it's really hard to get the camera to focus. So again, I'm just going to use this other pliers just to wrap that feather charm on. And so now I have a couple little beads or a bead and a charm hanging off of it. So that's what we have so far, is just the little feather charm and the little bead that I added. Then usually while I store them, I usually just go ahead and add like a little garment pin, which looks like this, to the top. And then if I'm using this like in a fabric book or something, or then I can just attach it to the page easily. And if I want to later on, I can take that off. But for now, I'm just going to leave it on. And that's my little boho embellishment. So thanks everybody so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day and happy crafting.